The Prepper Podcast, episode 36.
They've got to know whether or not they're presidents of Christ.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and to develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and more enjoyable life. This is episode 36. And today is another great show, part of this series on having your own backup banks and all this other good stuff where we lower our power consumption. We've already talked about that. And we've already talked a little bit about alternative power and what to consider for your alternative power needs for charging your battery bank. And then we've talked ad nauseum about batteries and technical jargon and stuff like that for your batteries. And then we've talked about chargers for these batteries and everything else dealing with chargers and the fact that you want a smart charger instead of a dumb charger and how awesome it is for your batteries and what charger you need for what application. So now you've got a PhD in batteries and about a 4-year degree in chargers. So that's all you need to know about that. And now we're going to jump into battery banks today. And you're going to know everything that you need to know about battery banks and inverters. Everything that you need to know and more. All right, so let's get started. Today's show notes may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/036. So make sure you go and check out the show notes because I want you guys to start leaving me comments. All right, now for the housekeeping. I want each and every one of you to visit my Facebook page. Just go to theprepperpodcast.com/Facebook. All right, and I want you to talk to me there because I promise you I check it often and I will talk back. You can also meet me on Google Plus and Twitter and all that. And all of that stuff, I'll be honest with you, I'm not straight on there all the time. But I do check my email, and I make sure that that stuff comes to my email. So if you say something to me on Twitter, I will respond back. And occasionally I do jump on Twitter and Google Plus and stuff like that so that I can make comments and interact with you guys. But that being said, Facebook is my place. All right? Another place of mine, iTunes. Go to theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes and hit the subscribe button. And then after you hit the subscribe button, hit the 5-star review thing. Hit 5 stars and then say something about it and say this is the greatest podcast you've ever heard because Ken really loves to give you lots of in-depth information. All right, and if you would like to be a guest on my show, because I know that I haven't done many guest shows, I've only done a couple, and I think they turned out fairly decent, go to theprepperpodcast.com/guests. I mean, how can I make this stuff easier for you guys? You go to theprepperpodcast.com/, and then whatever I want you to, or, whatever we want to do, whatever you want to go to my website and do, you can do it by these links that I make for you. So if you went to theprepperpodcast.com/guest, guess where that's going to take you? That's going to take you to a form that you can fill out to be a guest on my show. And then if you want to just leave feedback, you don't want to be a guest on my show, but you would like to ask me a question or give me a comment, and you would like to hear it on the show, then you can give me feedback at 978. This is my number. Listen up, the feedback line, 978 knows it. That is 978 knows it. And if you do not have letters on your touchpad, that would be 978-566-9748. Or you can just visit my website, theprepperpodcast.com, and there will be a big green banner on the right-hand side. And it says something like speak pipe or click here or something like that. And you click it, and then you get a big pop-up, and it says record. Now, you need to be on a computer for this, because if you're on a computer, it's just going to use the microphone on your computer, and then whenever you click it, you record your question or your comment or your complaint, and then I get it directly to my email, and I will put it on the show with my answer or my rebuttal. Okay, so make sure that you give me feedback, guys. And now for the wonderful, terrific news segment that we always have by wonderful Mr. Jay Bradbury of PreparePDX.com. Make sure you visit his site because he puts in so much work for you guys. All right? I am actually thinking of making him one of the very first members of an advisory council or something like that. And Jay, if you're listening to this, let me know how you think. But I really would like to get people that are really in-depth in knowledge about certain things, okay? And I consider Jay already my news guy, okay? Because he's really good at finding these news segments and then throwing them within a 1 to 2 minute segment that you guys can understand. And if you want to know more about the news, you just click on the link that he sends me that I put in the show notes. I mean, he has done us such a service, and I really appreciate it, Brad. All right, so now, because I've talked this guy up, let's go to Jay Bradbury with our news piece.
Thanks, Ken, and now for your news flash. The Supreme Court has passed down a ruling that you are no longer allowed to buy a weapon on another person's behalf. In other news, there's unrest in Brazil as more than 1 million Brazilians poured into the streets of over 100 cities in the week's largest anti-government demonstrations. Protests that saw violent clashes break out in several cities as people demanded improved public service, the spiraling cost of the 2014 World Cup, and an end to corruption, faced tear gas, pepper spray, and rubber bullets. And last, if you've got your Tuesdays and Thursdays free, about 9 p.m. Eastern, Summer of Survival will be playing videos from, 12 weeks, 24 webinars from leading experts, and 36 hours of advanced online survival training. Registration is free. Alright, back to you, Ken.
Now, normally I have some kind of nice little remark to make about the news segment that Jay's done, but today I don't. And I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you exactly why I don't have a comment. I don't have a comment on Jay's news segment because his news segment isn't done yet. All right, next week is my wife's birthday, and I am going to spend the week at her, giving her a great birthday. I haven't figured it out whether we're going to do a boat or like take a pontoon boat out on the lake, or whether we're just going to do a pool rental and land between the lakes. I haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do, but I'm going to be honoring her on her birthday instead of recording. So actually, this recording is done in advance, and Jay Bradbury hasn't sent me his news update yet, so I don't have a comment for that. But I can promise you this, I can bet you this, I bet it was a good one. So Jay, I want to thank you very much for your news segment, and this rant right here, right after his news segment, was just so you guys know that I try to be completely transparent with the show. All right, so now let's get on to our wonderful discussion about building battery banks, doing DC systems, and AC, DC systems and home and mobile battery banks and inverters and all this wonderful stuff. We're going to finally start tying some things together, guys. Oh, I'm excited. This is going to be a great show. All right, so let's get started with the DC only system. All right, you're going to walk into Walmart because all you have is a couple dollars and you want to get yourself a battery bank. So you're going to walk into Walmart and you're going to tell them, because you guys took the battery, you listened to the battery show, you're going to tell them that you want that Group 29 Marine battery, because they don't have a 31 at Walmart, but they have a Group 29 Marine battery. All right, so you're going to get the Group 29 Marine battery, either it's going to be either Duracell or Energizer. And then you're going to get yourself a 10-amp Schumacher charger, which they also have at Walmart. Or you can go to my link of my last show, and that was episode 34. You can go there, and you can get whatever charger off of Amazon. But you can get that thing at Walmart. You're going to connect that 10-amp Schumacher charger to your Marine battery, and you are going to place it in a cupboard or a closet or something like that, and you pretty much can forget about it, and it's going to charge. Go ahead and plug that charger up and let it do its thing. Let it keep it charged. And then you're going to always leave the charger on your battery and leave it plugged in. Always leave it connected so that you have this thing available when the power goes out. And then you're going to get 1 to 2 12-volt light sockets. All right, 1 to 2 12-volt sockets. I guess I said light sockets, but I meant like the lighter sockets, the 12-volt sockets. And you're going to get a 12-volt splitter. And that's the thing that you plug into your cigarette lighter in your car, and it's got 4 or 5 different 12-volt sockets on it. Okay, so get a couple of those sockets that you're going to put on your battery, and go ahead and get the splitter that's going to split that into about 4 different sockets each. And then you're going to grab 12-volt USB chargers for multiple uses. And these 12-volt USB chargers, you're going to plug those into the sockets of the splitters. All right, the splitters, you're going to plug these 12-volt USB chargers in there, because everything is going to the way of the USB charger nowadays. Everything has that. So you can get something and you want the micro or the mini USB cable or whatever. It doesn't matter whether you want a micro cable or mini cable or a regular USB cable. It's all the same. It goes from the USB connection on the charger. All right. The bigger the charger, the better. And I don't mean size-wise. I mean amperage-wise. You want to get a 2-amp if possible. All right. They're coming out with some 2-amp stuff, and they've already had 1 amps. Okay, they've already had the 1 amps, and then they've got the really crappy 500 milliamps. Okay, so in this order is what you want. You want to get the 2-amp USB chargers if possible. Then if you can't find that, you get the 1.5 or the 1 amp. All right, and then if you can't find any of those, which seems almost impossible, then you can go ahead and get those cheap, crappy 500 milliamp. All right, here's the thing. It charges everything up a lot faster with the 2-amp and the 1-amp over the 500 milliamp, and that's why you want it. And I would just do whatever I can to get the higher one, because it's going to be a lot better. And they even have those that you plug in now that have 2 of them. It has a 2-amp and a 1-amp, so a total of 3 amps. You can charge 2 different devices off the same plug. That's awesome. Okay, so the best and the cheapest way to charge this battery, all right, here's the thing. You have it in the closet, and it's been charged, and you have the power go out. And this, let's see, you pull the battery out, you plug everything up to it, you got yourself a 2-volt light or a 2-watt LED light, something like that, and you're sipping this energy. You're sipping it down, you're running your chargers, you got communications, you got lights, and the power is out. Well, here's the thing. Now your battery is going low. All right. Well, your battery's going low. How the heck are you going to charge it? You can't charge it in your house. You can't use your 3-stage Schumacher charger. So what are you going to use? Well, simply, you take your battery and you go and you plug it up to the battery terminals on your car and start your car up. Okay? Not necessarily in that order. I hope you guys can't hear my baby crying in the background because I'm locked away in a room while I'm doing my podcast, and my wife is dealing with the baby in there. It's Father's Day as I'm recording this, so I'm spending my Father's Day to record all of these wonderful podcasts for you guys, so that I can have the time free for my wife during her birthday. So I get the Father of the Year award, right? Somebody send me a Father of the Year award. All right. So anyways, we're going to get back to it. The best and cheapest way to charge your battery when the power is out and your battery has gone down and you don't want to destroy your battery by deep cycling it all the way down, you start your car, you attach the jumper cables to your car battery, and then you attach the jumper cables to your marine battery, and you're going to charge your marine battery that way. All right. So, adding inverters will add more options, okay? But they have their own drawback. If you add inverters, they have power draw, okay? So, for every inverter that you add, that's more lights that you cannot add. So, for now, we're sticking with the DC. We're going to add inverters here in a minute. But what you do want to keep is you want to keep a voltmeter for indication. I've got a really good one on the show notes. I got it titled Great One right here. It's underneath where it says voltmeter for indication. All right. They have little 12-volt LED lights that you can, you add that so that you can see the light, and you add this voltmeter indication. It's got 3 LED lights on it, and it'll tell you what voltage your battery's at. And at 12 volts DC, that's why you get this 12-volt DC LED light. At 12 volts DC is when you want to start charging it again. All right, so now let's go into adding inverters. All right, because right now we pretty much have figured out that there is a DC option for just about anything out there. And if you don't believe me, go to a truck stop. But because you guys want something a little easier to work with, you don't care about the extra 2 to 3 to 5 watts of power draw for each of these inverters that you put on your battery, then you want to add some inverters. All right, I would recommend you add multiple inverters. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But you should actually, now here's the thing, I talked about doing this DC only power system inside your house. But the crazy thing is before I even want you to do anything with batteries, I want you to buy inverters before buying your battery bank. And why the crap do I want you to do that? Because you have a generator/battery bank in your car. The only thing you're missing is an inverter to get power from your car into your home so that you can run your AC appliances. So I always recommend you get an inverter before spending all the money to create this battery bank. But when you create the battery bank, I prefer for you to keep it DC so that you can minimize the amount of loss that you have. It's just more efficient. And I'm not harping against inverters with a battery bank here, okay? I have inverters and I use them all the time. But what I'm saying is if you can get DC versions of something, a lot of times it's going to be more efficient. Just because you don't have the power draw of the inverter itself for the fan and the cooling and all that. And then obviously electronics have heat losses and stuff like that. So you want to stick with an inverter first on your car, and then you start building your little tabletop battery bank with your marine battery, and you want to keep that DC as much as possible. But then you've got to add inverters because you've got things that you cannot run on DC. So let's go ahead and add some inverters, and let's talk about the inverters that you're going to use on your car and what you're going to use on your battery bank whenever you get to that point. There are 2 basic types of inverters. You have a modified sine wave inverter and a true sine wave inverter. Okay, let me tell you, if you look at the waves of an ocean and how they roll nice and easy, well, that's a true sine wave, okay? Now, it's not really, but if you're thinking about electron flow and stuff like that, the sine wave is that nice fluid up and down. That's a true sine wave. Modified sine wave is like looking at a bunch of steps. Now, technically, it's really just a bunch of steps of current while voltage is actually at peak. But I'm not going to get into the real technicals of it because I don't want to confuse anybody. Just think of the inverter is going to give you AC, but it's not quite as smooth. It's kind of blocky. So if you tried to make waves out of Legos, you know how it's going to have kind of like a step up and then step down and then go down and then up. So if you were just building like an ocean out of Legos and trying to show all the waves and stuff like that, it's going to be blocky like that. So it's not going to be a true sine wave. But here's the big thing. All right, we're going to compare them real quick. The modified sine wave is so much cheaper than a true sine wave inverter. I mean, why in the world would you spend 3 to 4 times as much just to get something that's a true sine wave? I mean, why would you be that way? It's kind of like, I can understand that people that want true sine waves, I guess, because I'm kind of a beer snob. I don't want Bud Light and Budweiser. I want something a little bit better. I mean, the cheapest thing I get is like Fat Tire, and that really is the cheapest thing that I get. I usually get like a nice porter or something like that. And I mean, I just prefer the better stuff. But as far as this goes, according to me, I mean, everything works off the modified sine wave inverter, so why in the world would you want to go ahead with a true sine wave inverter, spend 3 to 4 times as much just so that you can say, well, I've got a true sine wave inverter, because those guys are constantly saying that things don't work. They say I've heard that your laptop won't work on it, which I've used my laptop on once all the time, and then they say that all these different motors don't work on them, but guess what? They do, because they're induction motors. That's right, induction motors. I threw that out there. So it's step AC instead of true AC. Electronics, they have their own DC power supplies. So it's going to go ahead and take that AC. It's going to make DC out of it anyways. So why are you really worried about the fact that it's not real clean AC? Because all your electronics, they have their own power supply because they have to convert the AC back to DC. So when you got it connected to a battery bank, you're going from DC to AC back to DC. Hence the reason why I tell you that it's actually a little more efficient to just go ahead and get things that you can plug straight into a cigarette lighter, because it's a little more efficient to not have to convert to AC and lose all that stuff and then convert back to DC. It's just more efficient on the production side and on the load side of everything. All right, but electronics have DC power supplies anyways, so they will take modified sine waves. And the only thing that won't run on a modified sine wave inverter is a synchronous motor. Okay, so if you have any pumps that are synchronous pumps, then they won't run on modified sine wave inverter. They have to run on a true sine wave inverter, and the reason why they have to do that is because they have a DC. It's not an induced field in the rotor. They have their own. They have their own field in the rotor, and it has to run at synchronous speed. It can't have any slip. So I know that I just threw some stuff out there that doesn't make sense, but understand that a synchronous pump is the only thing that you might possibly have that won't work on a modified sine wave inverter. And most of the pumps that you're going to have around your house, any of these little sump pumps or the 110 plug-in pumps, they're almost always induction motors, 110 induction motors. So you're pretty much going to have all induction motors. So once again, you don't have to have a true sine wave inverter. You get a modified sine wave inverter. If you're getting your modified sine wave inverter, what size should you get? Well, you need to get a smaller one first, and here's the reason why. Smaller inverters are more efficient than the bigger inverters, okay? So if you're thinking about a 100-watt inverter, you're probably going to get 0.5 to 1 watts of leakage current. Now, this isn't a very accurate rule, okay? So let's say you got 100. It's going to be a rule of thumb of about 0.5 to 1 watts of leakage current per 100 watts on the inverter. And the reason why I say it's not very accurate is because let's look at this. All right, if you have a 100-watt inverter, then you're going to get about 1 watt of leakage current. All right, but as you get to a higher end inverter, let's say like a 2,000-watt inverter has 10 watts of leakage current. Now that rule doesn't really fit, does it? So at the 100-watt inverter, you got 1 watt of leakage current, which is 1 watt per 100. And then on the higher end, you're spending more money, so there's a little bit more technology in there, and there's a little bit more robustness in there. And there's a lot more efficiency that's been put into this thing on this 2,000. I don't know if I was saying 200 earlier, but I'm talking 2,000. 2,000-watt inverter is only going to have 10 watts of leakage current. So if you have a 2,000-watt inverter, then you're only getting 0.5 watts per 100 watts on the high end. So you would definitely want a 2,000-watt inverter, right? Because you're getting less leakage for the capacity, right? Well, here's the thing. You plug in a 2,000-watt inverter onto your batteries, and you only pull 15 watts out of it, you still got 10 watts of leakage current. Maybe a little bit less because it doesn't get quite as hot. So no, you want the smaller inverter that you're only going to get 1 total watt of leakage on as you use your 15 watts of power. Or so you get a 100-watt inverter, you get a 250, you get a 400, you get an 800, you get a 2000, whatever. Okay, so let's talk technicalities. Let's talk the jargon, stuff like that. You remember what I did with the batteries, and you kind of remember what I did with the chargers. So let's go and do that for the inverters. I know that for some of you this is the most boring part, but here it is. It's very important that you understand what I am talking about each time I go through this stuff, because when we wrap it all up, you're going to see exactly why you needed to know all the stuff. Remember, I was talking about volts and amps and stuff like that with the batteries. All right. Watts equals volts times amps, or power equals voltage times current, okay? That would be watts equals volts times amps. So inverters are 12 volts DC, right? They're 12 volts on the DC side, but the AC side has to be 120 volts to run all your stuff. So it is 10 times higher voltage on the AC side over the DC side. So 12 volts DC on one side, and it's 120 volts AC on the other side. The wattage of this thing is going to be about the same on both sides. I do understand that I've already told you that there is some leakage in these things, that there is some consumption in these things, and the fact of the matter is that you might have 2,000 watts on one side, but you only really have like 1950 available on the 120 side. That's fine, but we're going to keep it simple. The KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. We're going to say if you have a 2,000 watt inverter, if you have a 100 watt inverter, it's the same on both sides, just to make the math easier. The wattage is the same on both sides. So what that means is a 120 watt inverter, for a 120 watt inverter, that you are going to have 10 amps on the DC side and 1 amp on the AC side. Let me do the math for you real quick. You have a 120 watt inverter, but you have 12 volts DC. Watts divided by volts equals current. That means that you're going to draw 10 amps. But it's 120 volts on the other side, right? So 120 watt inverter, 120 volts AC on the other side. The watts, the 120 watts divided by the volts, 120 volts, equals a current of 1 amp on the AC side. So if you have something that's going to pull 1 amp of AC current, then it's going to pull 10 amps on the other side. All right, this is where the heat comes from, is your current. All right, that's what melts cables, is the current flow. It's not the voltage. Voltage is what allows it to get through resistances and kill you. But what really makes the heat is current. If you get a fault current, that is going to heat up the cable. So that's why on a 10 amp circuit, even if it's 12 volts DC, on a 10 amp circuit, we're going to need much bigger cables than we would on a 1 amp circuit. You getting me yet? So what that means is if you have to move power from point A to point B, then you are going to want to move power on the 120 volt side. It's going to go further, and it's going to lose less voltage, and it's going to pull less current, which means you use a much smaller cable, which means it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper than to get those big beefy cables that you need for your inverter on the 12 volt side. All right, it's going to be a lot cheaper for you to just go and buy a bunch of extension cables and stuff like that, and use those, plug those in, and run them out to wherever you need. Now, this does not mean, now that I've told you all this does not mean that you will always be pulling that 1 amp on the AC side and you will always be pulling 10 amps on the DC side. If you plug in, let's say you have this 120 watt inverter, okay? And you plug in a 10 watt light. You plug in a 10 watt light. Let's make, for the math, let's make this a 100 watt inverter. It's just going to make it so much easier. 120 or 100 watt inverter. I'm sorry about this. 100 watt inverter. Then you plug in a 10 watt light. Well, you know with the 10 watt light and this 100 watt inverter that you're only going to be pulling a piece of it, which also means you're going to be pulling 10 watts on the other side at 12 volts, which means it's going to be somewhere around an amp, right? So it's going to be like 0.1 something amps on the AC side, but it's going to be 1 amp on the other side, and you still have a 100 watt inverter plugged in, or a 120 for that matter. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you're using is what's going to pull it, right? The load that you have connected is what determines how much you're going to pull. But every inverter has a certain amount of draw, so remember that. That's why we go with the smaller inverters first. Now, how can you determine the minimum battery life? All right, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about looking at your battery. We already understand batteries, and we already understand amp hours and everything else. So how in the world are we going to equate all this inverter jargon to make sure that we know how long our batteries are going to last? How do you know how long your battery is going to last? Well, let's look at it. Let's get a 100 amp hour battery, and then we're going to have a 240 watt inverter, and it's going to be fully loaded, okay? We're talking about how long it's going to last in a worst case scenario on this inverter. All right, so 100 amp hour battery, 240 watt inverter, fully loaded. Well, a 240 watt inverter at 12 volts that is fully loaded is going to pull 20 amps on the DC side. That would be 240 divided by 12, so that's watts divided by volts, equals current, which is 20 amps. If we have a 100 amp hour battery at 100 amp hour battery at 20 amps, that's going to be 5 hours, because you take the 100 amp hours divided by amps equals 5 hours. So at 100 amp hour battery or pair of batteries at 240 watts is going to last 5 hours before it's completely dead. Now, if you want to get all crazy, I've gone ahead and thrown this on my show notes so that you can kind of make a copy of it. But if you want to get all crazy, you can do this as your equation. Amp hours times the volts divided by the inverter watts. So amp hour of the battery times 12 for the voltage divided by the wattage of the inverter that you have plugged in is going to equal the worst case scenario hours that your battery will last. So battery capacity times 12 divided by inverter watts equals hours that your battery will last in the worst case scenario with that inverter connected. So now that we know everything there is to know about connecting an inverter up to our batteries, now we feel accomplished enough, we feel confident ourselves enough to create an AC/DC tabletop system with a marine battery and with an inverter. This is still kind of on a budget, right? Because it's a little tabletop thing and you don't want to spend a bunch of money on it, but you want it to be nice, you want it to be there so that you can use it. You're going to find yourself a 100 or 150 watt inverter. You're going to plug it into a 12 volt socket. From that inverter, you can power LED lights. You got because we used a small inverter, we've got a lower draw. But these LED lights, you go with like a 2 watt LED light. When it's pitch black outside, or when it's pitch black in your house because the power's out, a 2 watt light is going to light the place up, okay? A 2 watt LED light is going to be fine. It's probably going to give you as much light as about a 40 watt incandescent bulb. So go with a 2 to 4 watt LED light because you want to sip. You want to sip the power from the battery. You don't want to just use it all up. All right. So also, if you were to get two 200 watt inverters on your battery bank, that's going to be better than one 400 watt inverter. All right. So you want 2 smaller inverters before you get a bigger inverter. And the reason for that is 2 is 1, 1 is none, and what that means is if you have 2 and 1 fails, you still have 1. But if you have 1 and 1 fails, you got nothing. So 2 is 1, 1 is none. Now what you can do is you can plug in your nickel metal halide batteries. You get yourself a good battery charger. And you can charge all these AA and AAA nickel metal hydride batteries. And you can charge those right on your battery bank. Just get a charger, plug it into your inverter, plug your inverter into your socket that's connected to your battery, and you're good to go. You got all these AA, AAAs. You can use them for weather radios. You can use them for your kids' video games or whatever you got to do. All right, but you got to have the batteries in order to charge them. So you got to get the batteries. You can run a radio. You can run a small TV from it, little 40-watt small TV. Well, now you've got light, you've got comms, you've got communications to the outside world. You got radio and TV coming in. You got all these batteries that you can do for other radios and things like that. I mean, you're charging your cell phones, and you could even put a scanner radio on there if you wanted to. So you got all your lights and your communications. Well, what if you have a sump pump? All right. If you got a sump pump, go ahead and get yourself like a 1/4 horsepower sump pump, right? And that's going to be 460 watts. A 1/4 horsepower sump pump at 460 watts is going to run off of a 1 marine battery for 1 to 3 days. And it depends on the battery. I'm just making generalized statements here because there are different sizes of battery. But a 1/4 horsepower sump pump will run 1 to 3 days on 1 marine battery. But the amount of money that you've got invested in this one marine battery to run your sump pump and an inverter that's going to run, a 500 watt inverter or 800 watt inverter that you're going to use to run this sump pump, the amount of money that you've got invested in that is a lot better than the amount of money that you're going to have to invest in a flooded basement or something like that. Go ahead and add a small AC LED light on your inverter or LED Christmas lights, because you want to string those up and you want indication that everything is functioning at all times. All right, so you're going to want DC and AC indication at all times to make sure that your system is charged and functioning properly. And if either one of those goes out, well, then you're going to know which component failed. You're going to know whether your AC component failed or your DC component failed. And if your DC component failed, well, then you got to figure out whether it was the batteries or whether it's the charger or both. So, all right, so let's go over the inverters that you're going to want. I would recommend to get two 400 watt inverters, and then get an 800 watt inverter, and then get a 1500 watt inverter. And the reason why I recommend that you get these specific inverters for this is you are going to use two 400 watt inverters for most of your loads. All right, and the reason why you're using these is for the efficiency and the reduced draw that you're going to have from these 400 watt inverters. The next one is going to be your 800 watt inverter, and that's for your bigger loads, such as your refrigerator. So when you decide you want to plug in your refrigerator for a couple hours in order to get it cold and keep it cold, you're just going to do this a couple hours at a time, right? And you're going to get your refrigerator cold. It's so insulated, it's going to stay cold the rest of the day. An 800 watt generator should be enough for your refrigerator to kick on, and it's going to run. And you get a 1500 watt inverter. You're gonna like what I'm going to do here. You get yourself a 1500 watt inverter. Why do you get yourself a 1500 watt inverter? Do you get it for a refrigerator? No. You can run your microwave off of it. You can run those sump pumps off of it. But here's the main thing that you're going to get. You're going to get your coffee pot. Your coffee pot is 1100 watts. It's all heat. It's all resistive. So you're going to pull so much power. A coffee pot pulls a lot of power. So I would recommend, if you got a coffee pot and you have to use this coffee pot, that you get a thermos and you shut your coffee pot off right away as soon as you're done brewing it, and you pour it into the thermos and you drink your coffee from that thermos. And if it gets a little cool, oh well. You don't want to waste all the power from a coffee pot because you wanted your coffee, so you shut it off once it's brewed. All right. Now, this is what I said you're going to like. If you make one pot of coffee, that is equivalent to 6 days of light off of this same battery. One pot of coffee is equivalent to 6 days of light. Now, we're talking 8-hour days here, but I'm just trying to make a point here that if you have to have your coffee, then you're going to lose a lot of light for every time that you make a pot of coffee. So why not use something better? Why not use like a we have a Keurig, which is going to pull quite a bit of power, but the benefit of the Keurig is it doesn't have the big coil underneath to keep the pot hot. And we've also got French presses. Now, this is the best thing. French press makes the best coffee around. French presses make the best coffee, and the best part about it is all you're doing is plunging it up and down, and you put hot water in it. All right, you put hot water in your French press, and then you just use the French press and make your coffee with it. Now, if you're like me and you've got natural gas for your hot water heater and you lose power, you got all the hot water in the world, you don't have to use your coffee pot to heat your water up. Now you can use your French press, and now you got 6 more days of light available on this battery. Let me explain to you the amount of power in one marine battery. The amount of power in one marine battery is the same as the amount of power in 1 quart of gas. 1 quart of gas can move a large truck 5 to 6 miles, and it can run a 2,000 watt or 2 kilowatt generator for 3 to 4 hours. That is the same amount of power that is in one marine battery, one marine deep cycle battery. Now, when you think about such a small package of how much is in this small package of a battery, and you start thinking, oh, that's a ton of power. Well, just think about the size of a quart. All right, it's much smaller than that battery. So you could easily store gasoline, and that stored gasoline is going to have more power than the same amount of space worth of batteries. So why in the world would we want to even use a battery bank over a generator anyways if we could just store the gas for the generator? Well, if you want to run a 2-watt LED bulb on your system, okay? So let's say you have a 2 kilowatt generator, but all you're doing is pulling 2 watts on this LED bulb, right? And you're pulling it off this generator. You're going to be able to run for 1,000 hours. Or so you thought. You'd be wrong if you thought that, but you know, because I've been teaching you about these batteries, you think a generator is going to do the same thing? No, it's not going to do the same thing. The generator runs off of a Carnell cycle, which is not the same thing as what the battery runs off of. The generator is still going to use 500 watts if you pulled power or not. Okay, that generator is always going to pull that 500 watts. This is called a turn-down ratio. All right. The fact is this 2 kilowatt generator is always running at 500 watts if you are pulling less than 500 watts. This is a turn-down ratio of 4 to 1. All right. And that's because the generator runs off of a thing called a Carnell cycle. But the battery, it's just sitting there sipping. You put a 2 watt LED bulb on a battery, it's just going to sip and sip and sip. All right. What you want from this battery is what you're going to get. You want to pull a lot, you're going to get a lot. You want to pull a little bit, you're going to get a little bit. You want to sip from it, it's going to give you a sip for a really long time. The effective turn-down ratio of a battery, because if you're not running anything on a battery, then the leakage on this battery is going to be like 0.2 amps. That's 200 milliamps. Instead of 500 watts, this is more like, let's see, half a watt, if that. Let's see. No, that's going to be more like a watt. All right. So anyways, if we, I digress. If we are pulling from this battery, the effective turn-down ratio here is 25,000 to 1 because we're using Ohm's law. And I've been teaching you Ohm's law this entire time, right? I've been teaching you Ohm's law. Current is voltage over resistance. Okay? Current is voltage over resistance. And that can also be said another way. And then it also includes, the fact that whatever you are pulling, whatever resistance that you put in a circuit is going to affect the amount of current in the circuit based on the voltage there. You raise the voltage, you raise the current. You lower the resistance, you raise the current. Excuse me. So because we're using Ohm's law, it's very efficient at our consumption, because we're using Ohm's law, the effective turn-down ratio of a battery is 25,000 to 1, which is much better than what you get when you get on your generator. So why in the world would you use a generator then, right? Well, I'm going to tell you when you want to use your battery and when you want to use your generator. Think about it like this. If you want a lot of power right now for a very small amount of time, use your battery. If you want a little bit of power for a lot of time, use your battery. But if you want a lot of power for a lot of time, you need to use your generator because you're going to destroy your battery by doing that. All right? Batteries are meant to sip, or they're meant to give you a punch right now, but they're not meant to do a large amount of power for a lot of time. And that's when you throw in your generator. And while you're pulling this lot of power for a lot of time, you may as well be charging up your batteries by plugging in this Schumacher into your generator. So when you wake up in the morning and you've got all this hot water and stuff like that, especially if you got gas like me and you've got hot water even when your power goes out. But let's say you get up, you need to run water, so you're on a well and you need to run your well pump, and then you've got to clear your sump, and you want to run your refrigerator to cool it down, and you want to run your freezer in order to keep it frozen, and you've got all this stuff going on. You want to make your pot of coffee, and you want to cook some food or something like that on your little electric stove, something like that, and you're going to be drawing all this power. Then go ahead and you're going to turn on your generator. And while you got your generator on, you plug in your Schumacher charger to your marine battery and you charge your battery. And then once you're done with all of this, all right, and you could run your central AC unit until you get down to temperature or something like that. So you're going to run your generator for a couple hours in the morning, and then you're going to shut it off. And then when you shut it off, you're going to run solid and run deep, and you're going to just sip power off your battery. In order to just sip power off your battery instead of just drawing it down and needing to constantly turn on your generator, go ahead and reduce your power consumption on your AC system. You can do things like heat with the newer electric blankets. These things draw like 60 watts for like 10 seconds. And then it's off for 50 seconds, and then it's on for another 10 seconds. So 60 watts for 10 seconds, that's kind of like drawing 10 watts continuous. And if you have a couple of these plugged up, let's say you got 10 people in your house, well, then it's like you're drawing 100 watts continuous off of this system instead of running your heater. And then you could cool with the small fan blowing in your face or something like that. I know it's not perfect, guys, but it's going to keep you, it's going to keep you at least nice and cool to some extent. Even if it's hot outside, a fan blowing on you, when it wicks the sweat off of you, it'll cool you down a little bit. And then there's another thing a concept I've been throwing around in my head. It's a ice cooler air conditioner. And what it is I drill a hole with a little duct or whatever, and I throw a little fan on it, and it's going to blow air into the ice chamber of the cooler that I've got filled with ice, and then I've got a hole coming out the other side that is going to be blowing on an individual person. So it's like a direct chiller. So if you guys want to build one and take some pictures of it and let me know about it, that's fine. That'd be a really cool idea. But you just take a fan, you blow some air into the ice, and then the air coming out is going to be nice and cold. And believe it or not, that is a very low draw system. And not only that, but it actually takes less power for an ice maker or something like that to make ice than it does for you to run a refrigerator. So it's actually a very efficient way of doing it to create a bunch of ice and then cool the air with that ice as you blow it through. All right. So that's one way for you to do it, is a little ice cooler fan air conditioner thing. And then camping gear is great. I mean, I found hand crank blenders. I found French presses, propane camp stoves. You got your grill. I mean, you've got all kinds of different gear, all kinds of camp gear, things that you wouldn't even think about using unless you were going camping. That stuff can keep your power consumption low. All right, so now that I've talked about all that, I've talked about having your marine battery, something like that. I guess I didn't put it in a way to make you guys think about your home battery bank, but just remember that all of this stuff that I'm talking about can be used for the golf cart batteries wired up in series, and that can be your home battery bank. But now I'm going to move on, and I'm going to talk about mobilizing your battery bank. All right, so if you want to mobilize your battery bank, let's talk if you're in a truck. All right, if you're in a truck, you go ahead and get yourself one of those toolboxes on the back, and you put two 6-volt GC2 golf cart batteries in it, and you're going to wire those in series to make it 12 volts. All right, this is going to be in your truck bed toolbox. All right, you're going to fasten the batteries into your box, and then you're going to place a large piece of wood, like a 2x10 or even like a thick plywood, in the box lid. And the reason why you do that is so that you can fasten all the parts to the lid. And then you're going to put a couple inverters in there. Go ahead and throw an 800-watt inverter in there, and throw a 1600-watt inverter in there. And go ahead and, screw these into the wood or the plywood or whatever. All right, and then that indicator that I talked about, the little 12-volt with the LED indication and stuff like that to make sure everything's working with the voltmeter attached to it and everything, go ahead and bring that back into the system and put that, plug that into one of the 12-volt drops on your battery. All right, you're going to wire up an extension cord to a receptacle in a 4-gang box. All right, let me explain what a 4-gang box is to you guys. That would be a dual receptacle. Okay, so 2 receptacles in one box, or the 2 pairs of receptacles in one box. That's going to be a total of 4 places that you could plug into. All right, that's what having it in a 4-gang box is. That is hardwired to an extension cord that's going to be plugged into one of your inverters. Okay, and make sure it's an extension cord with a ground. Also, in parallel with that, you will wire up an attic light socket with a 2 to 4 watt LED being attached. And what this is for is it's going to stay on all the time, because how nice is it for you when the power goes out, when you're in a disaster situation and it's dark outside and you need to get into your toolbox or you need to do something with your battery bank. How nice would it be for you to lift up that box and have that light shining down in there, and you can see everything that you're doing, and everybody else is like, holy cow, you got freaking power out here, and a tornado came through and ripped everything up, and you've got all this stuff in your car. That's just cool. All right, so that's kind of how you would do your truck bed box, okay? Now, if you were in a car, I used to do my car bank a lot like I would do a truck bank, but I don't do that anymore because it was very dangerous. It's a projectile. So you're going to just use your home marine battery off your tabletop system. All right, you can always find ways to clamp it down because you don't want it to become that projectile that I was talking about. But the great thing about this marine battery is you can keep it on your tabletop, but then when you have to, you can pull it off your tabletop and put it in your car. And if you want it to be permanent in your car, then you can clamp it down inside somewhere, or you can do a permanent mount underneath your hood just by your other battery. You can use all the same components that I talked about in the truck toolbox in the back of your car or something like that. And, obviously you're probably going to have to run some wires from the front of your car through all of the carpeting and stuff like that to where your components are going to be sitting. All right, so now that I've talked about the 2 different systems, versus a car versus a truck, we're going to talk about the stuff that can be the same for both of them. What if you want an alternative method to charge this? Well, I recommend charging this from your alternator at all times. But what if you just wanted the ability to charge it from a solar panel so that you didn't have to start your car up? So you get yourself a 100-watt solar panel as your source of power. So this 100-watt solar panel, you could have it inside your vehicle or whatever, or you can have it permanently mounted to the top of the vehicle. It doesn't really matter to me. And here's the thing. Sun's not out all the time, so solar panel's not your fix-all, okay? But this is going to be something great if you're out camping or hunting or whatever, and you want to use this battery bank, you want to sip off the battery bank, and you want something to charge your battery bank without you having to constantly start the car. So this 100-watt solar panel is a great convenience so that you don't have to start this car and use up all that gas. Now, how in the world are you going to separate your batteries in your little your automobile battery bank? How are you going to separate those from what's under your hood? You don't want to deplete your battery under the hood in order to charge your batteries that are in your battery bank, but you also don't want, when you're running, you don't want the power to go the other way. You don't want, when your battery goes bad in your car, you don't want to deplete your battery bank, your emergency battery bank. So how in the world are you going to make power go one direction but not the other? Right? Let's think about campers. Okay? A typical camper, a lot of people will go to the store and they'll buy a camper. It's a thing called a camper charger. Now all it is a basic diode that's what a diode does. It will only allow current to flow in one direction. And it has something to do with the doping of the diode and the PN junctions and having more positive over here, more negative over here. And it's a voltage thing, but what it does for us is it keeps current flowing in only one direction. But here's the thing. It's not smart. It doesn't know anything. So you can still overcharge batteries. You can still do all that stuff. It's not smart. So why would you do that when you can get yourself a smart charger? I already talked about it a little bit, right? I already talked about solar chargers a little bit. Well, if you use a SunForce 30-amp solar charger to separate between your car battery and your battery bank, when you're driving, you'll be charging your battery bank. And when you're not driving, the SunForce 30-amp charger is going to turn off, and it's not going to allow your batteries to feed back into your car battery. So you're allowing only one path of travel. And this charger also only works above like 12 volts. What that means is that no matter what you do and your batteries get drawn down, you cannot pull too much out of your car battery before the charger stops working. So now you're not going to draw down your car battery with your battery bank. It's ingenious. You know what's even better? The SunForce 30-amp charger is a 3-stage smart charger, and that means that it does actually have the 4 stages. All right, it's got all the stages of your typical Schumacher charger, but this is meant for solar panels, so it's meant to work from like 12 to 48 volts or whatever. And it works perfectly if you connect it up to your battery, your car battery, in the direction that it will charge your battery bank in your vehicle. But now you want to put solar on it, because we talked about a 100-watt solar panel. So what do you do if you want to put solar on a battery bank that's already connected to your car, and it's got the SunForce charger that's charging this battery bank, but it won't let it go back into your car? Well, let's just throw another charger on it. Let's just throw another SunForce charger. But this one, we're going to do a 10-amp charger because you got a 100-watt solar panel. All right? You take your SunForce, and this one is also a wonderful 3-stage smart charger. This SunForce 10-amp charger is going to allow for your solar panels to charge up your batteries, but it, by design, doesn't allow the batteries to discharge back to your solar panel. So now you've got your battery, your car battery, completely isolated from your battery bank using a SunForce 30 amp charger. And you can get to all these in the show notes, by the way. You can get to these links that'll take you to Amazon, where you can purchase this stuff and have it sent straight to your house. But you're going to have this 30 amp. It's isolating your main car battery from your battery bank, but still allowing you to charge whenever you're driving. And then you've got your solar panel. So when the sun's there, you've got the 10 amp SunForce charger, and it's isolating your solar panel from your battery bank and all this other stuff. So this is really sweet. You got all these batteries. Everything is completely isolated from one another, and everything is hunky-dory. And you've got all these indications so that your mobile battery bank, you know when it's working and when it's not. And then, even better, if you end up with your car battery going out, right? If you end up with a car battery that's not working and you need to jump yourself, well, now you've got a freaking jump start kit right there. All you need to do is run some jumper cables from your battery bank over to your car battery and start the sucker up. And you're going to pull the power from your battery bank to start your car. Now, that's not great for your batteries, but they're there for an emergency situation. And if you can't start your car, that's kind of an emergency situation. So go ahead and jump it out and do that. It's pretty sweet. It's a pretty awesome setup. All right, so I told you guys I was going to talk about generators, but then I remembered that I did a show on generators. All right, I did a show on generators, and in the future, I might actually set up another show to tell you even more about generators. But if you go to episode 10, if you go to theprepperpodcast.com and you go into the search bar and just type in generators, it's going to come up. But if you go to theprepperpodcast.com/010, you will get my episode on generators. All right. Now, I've already told you, though, how you're going to use this generator. You're going to wake up in the morning. You're going to run this generator. You're going to use all your stuff. You're going to make everything, and then you're going to plug your Schumacher battery charger into this generator while it's running and running all your big loads. And then whenever you're done with all your big loads and all your morning routine, you're going to turn your generator off. You're going to quietly sit power from your battery bank in your home or whatever. And then whenever you go to bed and you've got all the stuff that you want to do before going to bed, because some people prefer morning showers. Some people prefer night showers. Either way, you're going to start the generator back up for a couple hours in the evening while you're doing all the stuff and running all your big loads. And then you turn the generator back off. And through the night, you quietly sip power on the battery bank, just charging phones and doing whatever you need to do. And everything is great. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. It was a little bit off because it's gone kind of long, and I'm not used to talking this long. So I hope you guys really enjoyed all the valuable information, and I hope that you will create some battery banks, and I hope that you will send them to my email, and that would be ken@theprepperpodcast.com. You can email me at ken@theprepperpodcast.com. Send me some pictures if you guys decide that you want to make some battery banks using all of my information. And if you have any more questions about battery banks and batteries and inverters and chargers and stuff like that, just go ahead and drop me a line at ken@theprepperpodcast.com, and I will try to answer you. And I would actually prefer it if you called me at 978-KNOWS-IT and left audio feedback. I really prefer audio feedback over written feedback because it's so much more enjoyable, and it makes a much better show than me just reading off all these random questions from people. So I would really prefer, even if you don't like your voice, I would prefer you call in, because I promise you that nobody else thinks the way about your voice that you do. And with that, this was Ken Jensen of ThePrepperPodcast.com, teaching you strategies on self-reliance so that you can build a more resilient and more enjoyable life. Have a wonderful week. This is Ken, signing out.